I'm going to carry on with some more videos about using and controlling LFOs with AMS. And something worth mentioning at this stage is the P-amp page and the AMS settings that you can apply using this. If you listen to the piece of music that I played at the end of my AMS 10 video, you may have noticed that the LFO was running constantly. It also wasn't synced to the tempo of the music either. So it created a slightly quirky yet still danceable vibe as its timing cut across the drums. This raises one or two questions. Firstly, how can we turn an LFO on and off so that it only occurs when we want it to, and can we use alternate modulation sources to do this? Secondly, how do we control an LFO so that oscillations or regular swings in pitch will sync with the tempo of our drums or sequences and the beat of the music? And also, if we can get regular pitch oscillations that sync, what about oscillating volume changes, and how about swings in tone or panning effects? Can we do the same with them? Now you'll be pleased to know that the answer to all of these questions is yes. The answer to the first question can be found in the P-amp page, where there are alternate modulation controls available and we can use them to control the LFOs. I'll talk about these controls and then I'll put together another piece of music where I'll show you how to sync the LFOs to the beat of your song so that you can have tone, volume, panning and pitch oscillations that follow the beat and that can be controlled so that it can be stopped and started by one of the alternate modulation sources such as a switch, foot controller, foot pedal, whatever. I'll also show you how to get a compressor to pump in time to the music to produce an effect that you'll hear in so many modern dance tracks. If you're not sure about what I'm talking about, go to YouTube and listen to the pulsing strings that you get on the Killer's track Human, or on Britney Spears' Hold It Against Me, which have this really over-compressed pumping sound. I've started with an initialized program again, press the menu key, scroll down to the P-OSC page. Now I've changed the sample from the Kross piano to preset 231, which is the bright pad. Now if I press the menu button and select the P-OSC LFO page and change the shape to a square, if I now press a key, there's no LFO sounding. If I push the mod wheel, there's nothing sounding. The pitch bend's been set, and I'm hitting the sustain pedal, the damper pedal there, so that's been assigned to a setting. But otherwise, this is a blank canvas with which you can start setting alternate modulation sources to manipulate this particular preset. Now I've set an LFO, so let's get that working, and I'm going to press the menu key and I'm going to scroll to the P-amp page and I'm going to tab over to the mod tab, and for LFO 1 I'm going to set the INT or intensity to 99. You can immediately hear that pulsing, oscillating LFO. We haven't changed the pitch in the P-pitch setting, so you'll notice that this square wave is creating a tremolo effect. The volume is going up and down, but not the pitch. This sounds like a vibrato effect, but a vibrato effect is actually an oscillation between two pitches rather than two volumes. By the way, if you don't have a foot pedal, you can always assign another modulation source, so you could use the mod wheel or tempo knob or something else. So again, we're seeing the value of having alternate modulation sources. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the int setting, which is presently at plus 99. I've got the pedal wide open, so the pedal's having no effect, and I'm going to start bringing down the LFO int setting from 99 back to 0. And you can't hear any LFO, but what I'm going to do is use the pedal now. And we've just discovered how we can bring an LFO in and out using an alternate modulation source. But you've also noticed that almost reverb type quality that you get from having the intensity setting somewhere between 0 and 99. That's set to 32. That's using the pedal. You can still hear the LFO working when the pedal's open with that. That's because of that high intensity setting. If that's set down to about 10, you can barely hear it. It's there, but it's only when we bring the pedal in that you can get that big wide effect. And obviously using those two controls gives you greater depth of expression. So this is fairly easy when you've got one oscillator working, but don't forget each oscillator can have two LFOs, and you can add the common LFO to have a maximum of 5 of these LFOs working at once. So if you want to switch all of these on and off, you need to ensure that all of the LFOs have the same intensity settings and ideally the same AMS sources, so you can control it all with one controller, such as the pedal or the mod wheel. There are absolutely no rules that say that you can't have all 5 of your LFOs running in exactly the same fashion. But why would you want to do this when you can set one LFO at one speed, you can have a different wave for one LFO and another, and you can use completely different settings on all 5. You could have them running at once, you could have them running completely out of sync, and you can bring one LFO in using one source, say a foot pedal, and you can bring another one in using another source, such as the sustain pedal or even the tempo control. And you can even use one to create oscillating pitch or volume effects, while you use another to change a filter setting to create different tones. And you can sync all of these up so that they run in time with your drum beats or with your sequencer. I mean, filter sweeps in particular work really well when synced with the tempo of a drum track. Now the intensity settings for LFOs 1 and 2 are set to 0, but I now have LFO 2 AMS set to mod wheel 01. I've set the setting at the right of the LFO 2 to plus 99. Now if I play a note now, you'll hear absolutely no LFOs working at all. Now I'm going to hit the pedal. That brings in the LFO 1 as before. That's just holding the mod wheel. Now as you can see, both mod wheel and foot pedal are set exactly the same, which is rather dull, but it means I can bring in the same LFO with the same LFO settings with different alternate modulation sources. Now I'm now going to make this sound a little bit more interesting by messing with some of the waveforms on one and LFO speed on the other one. At this stage I want to change the LFO settings so that they both sound completely different. I'm going to do that by pressing the menu key and going into the POSC LFO page. Now you'll see across the top of that page 1 WAV, 2 FRQ, 2 WAV and 2 FRQ tabs. Now if you have a second oscillator running, you'll have exactly the same settings on that oscillator. But with these tabs we can actually change the waveforms and the frequency of these oscillators. Now I'm going to change them so that they're completely different. Using the page plus and minus buttons, tab over to the 1 FRQ setting and set the frequency to 68. That will give us a square wave that's controlled by the foot pedal and making that sound. Now if you tab over to the WAV 2 setting and change that to a sine, and then go over to the 2 FRQ and set that to 87. That's the mod wheel controlling that sound. Now I'm going to use the two together, so you get a combination of both. 1, none, 2, both. So you've got options where you can control these different waveforms and play them back at different frequencies and control them with AMS sources that are completely different or the same. Hopefully there you should be able to distinguish between the choppier effect of the square wave and the more rolling smooth effect of a sine wave. So you can use different waveforms, you can use different speeds of oscillator, and you can create some really neat effects. If at this stage you add a master effect like a dynamic delay, an auto panning setting, and you can use another AMS source to control the depth of pan, speed of pan, number of repeats for example, you can see how we can construct a program that shifts from left and right and has this dynamic drop in volume, increase in volume, change in pitch, change in tone, and we can do all sorts of crazy things.